I just want to welcome you all. We'll kick things off in just a minute. We'll give folks a couple minutes to sign on here and find their links and settle into their chair and get their coffee. As you're joining us, you'll see that Paloma has put up a slide here for us to just maybe meditate on, take a few minutes and write down a couple of your favorite jobs from any point in time in your life. So this can just be a private exercise. If you're feeling like you need to engage and you want to throw something in the chat box, you can, but it's not at all required. So yeah, just something for you to focus on while we wait a minute or two for everyone to join. And thank you for your patience while we waited just a moment to let you all in and pop up a slide. So if you're just joining us, welcome. I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Lori. Welcome to our monthly series, Cultivating Psychological Safety at Work. We are really glad you're here with us today. Before we make introductions, we would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. For those of us in the Portland area, we are on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin Kalapuya, Malala, and other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. Please join us in acknowledging this land and the indigenous people who have cared for it. I am Lori Eberly, founder of Radius Executive Coaching Development and author of Fuckery. My pronouns are she and hers. I am a clinical social worker by training and currently using those skills as an executive coach and facilitator. We also provide workplace mediation services and organizational assessments. This series is a direct response to the enormous threats that 2020 has thrown at us. Every month, we bring you an expert to improve emotional intelligence, teach trust-building skills, and enhance belonging at work. We need each other now more than ever. Next month, we'll feature, Ciara Pressler, followed by Crystal McGinney, and then Cage Leitner and Kathleen Holt in the new year. Tickets to Ciara's events will be emailed to you later today, along with Paloma's slides. And now I'd like to kick it over to Elaine, who has been a tremendous partner for Radius.
Thank you so much, Lori. Hi, everyone. My name is Elaine Shea. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at 52 Limited. For those of you who don't know, 52 Limited is a locally owned and operated creative and tech staffing agency. We jumped at the opportunity to partner with Lori and Radius to bring you this series because now more than ever, work and what work is like has changed. And having experts like Paloma and Cage, and last month we had Dr. Julie, is I think really insightful to those of us who are in Portland and in this space where we just need more guidance and education and we can learn from one another. So I just want to thank Lori again for this opportunity to allow 52 to support this event, and Paloma so much because Paloma's just a rock star. So thanks for being here with us today, Paloma.
Yes, she is. Thank you so much, Elaine. It is now my pleasure to introduce you all to Paloma Medina. Paloma is a trainer, speaker, and owner of 1111 Supply, a retail startup that specializes in beautiful work tools designed to help you feel more productive, happy, and balanced. Paloma's approach blends neuroscience, psychology, and humor to help people improve their work and personal lives, one skill and tool at a time. Her topics range from equity and inclusion to the science of goals and stress. She has worked with tech companies such as Etsy and DigitalOcean, nonprofit organizations, homeless healthcare clinics, as well as individual leaders and CEOs. She was born in Guadalajara, Mexico, and has made a home since on the West Coast since she was 8 years old. Good morning and welcome, Paloma.
Hi.
We're going to kick it over to you in just a minute. Before we do, I just want to let everyone tuning in to understand the format and sort of the flow of this of the program today. So Paloma will present for about an hour, and then we'll take questions around 12:35, 12:40. Please add your questions into the Q&A option, not into the chat box, so that we can easily find them and scroll through them at 12:40. Elaine will be monitoring the chat box throughout the event, and we want you to feel engaged as an active participant. The PDF versions of the slides will be sent to you later today. And a reminder to everyone that you see that little record button up in the left-hand corner, that this event is being recorded and will be available for you to watch later, because I know there's going to be all sorts of juicy information that you learn from Paloma. And without further ado, Paloma, take it away.
Thank you. Okay, everyone. So we are going to be doing a series of exercises together. So if you can't already tell, they're very similar in that they're going to be quiet, reflective exercises. So you'll definitely want some pen and paper. It can be like a napkin that you can write on. It can be scratch paper. It can be your notebook. So if you haven't grabbed one of those yet, it really will be helpful. That said, there's no group discussions, nothing like that. This really is a time to come just check in with yourself while also learning a ton about neuropsychology, which is what I nerd out about quite a bit. So with that, let me dive into it. So pen and paper, yes, awesome. We are going to be talking about something called core needs today, but within the bigger scope of cultivating psychological safety at work. And a little bit of equity and inclusion in there because I like to talk about that. All of it, however, in my past, what I really was focused on was performance. How can I support teams and individuals to perform their very best? Because it feels so good to do that. So that said, let's dive into Brains 101. Those of you who have taken my workshops, you know what I'm about to talk about, right? So Brains 101, 2 parts of the brain that really matter here. In particular, something called the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC, versus the amygdala. The amygdala is also part of the limbic brain, so you might know it that way. Now, the key thing is that I could do many workshops just about these 2 parts of the brain. But for this one, what we really want to focus on is the way in which they interact with each other. The amygdala is essentially the reaction in the survival part of the brain. That is its focus. Actually, one second, let me make sure that I switch my, there we go. Now I can make sure that my light's still on. Great. The amygdala is essentially, oh, sorry, I think someone, can we mute everyone? I'm hearing a weird background noise and maybe that might be distracting for some folks too. Is everyone muted? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Ha, sweet. Where was I? The amygdala, the limbic brain, amygdala, you might know it either way. The amygdala is part of the limbic brain. That part of the brain is essentially always scanning for whether or not its core needs are met. Needs are met, cool, everything's okay, awesome. However, if there's some kind of threat in the environment, then it changes its mode and decides, actually, I'm going to shut down the PFC. What is the PFC? The prefrontal cortex, right? The sheath kind of behind our forehead. It is the newest part of the brain from an evolutionary perspective, and it is the rational part of the brain. We like to think that for the most part, we are rational beings, but we are far from it. For the most part, the limbic brain is always active and making most of our decisions, often called habits. And the PFC sometimes comes on when we need some complex, subtle understanding of pros and cons, rational thinking. So it's an important part of the brain. It is not the most powerful. The limbic brain is so powerful because if need be, it needs to turn the PFC off. Why would we want our rational brain off? Because if you think about it, there's been times when something felt so threatened in you that maybe you got really aggressive. It could have been verbally, it could have been physically, right? Maybe you threw something like Angry Panda here. Maybe when you're a little kid, maybe you recently did. That essentially meant that the brain, your brain, felt something in its environment was threatening one of the core needs. So it shut down the PFC, shut down, i.e. the rational brain. And so maybe you weren't your full self and you weren't your most rational self. Right. So how could this be helpful? It was helpful, essentially, because the PFC is also the slower part of the brain. And if, say, a threat is coming at you, right, you needed to act quickly. This little guy. Now, in this case, he's just overreacting, right? It's just the caretaker that's coming to give him some food. But back in cave people days, that person might have actually been hunting him, or maybe currently, or that person to us could have been like a bear. The PFC would have gotten us killed being like, what kind of bear? Is it a baby bear? Maybe it's not a bear at all, and then we're dead. So it makes sense that the amygdala has this ability to shut down the PFC. But in the modern world, we're not around a ton of, bears or like people hunting us down, hopefully, right? So instead, the key thing that matters now is that yet the amygdala is still active. And if it considers a threat continues again and again, and we see this chronic threat to one of the core needs, it also means it's going to start a process of chronic stress, like physiological chronic stress. Chronic threat, chronic stress. Now, it's not meant to be chronic. Stress is really an early signal that the body and the brain kind of kicks on to say, hey, whatever's happening here, fix it. If this threat is here, you got to fix it. Stress is like an alarm. It's powerful. It's meant to be there. What if the thing that's threatening you or threatening one of your core needs, what if it just continues? What if you can't just fix it, right? That's when we get chronic stress. So here's the thing. Okay. Before we kind of talk about the repercussions, though many of you know even more than I do, the side effects of chronic stress, we need to talk about, okay, wait, what is being threatened, right? Like, what are the core needs? Is it anything? Bears? Obviously, they're not around anymore. What is it? From an emotional and a physical perspective, there's actually 6 now that we understand, and that essentially has replaced Maslow's hierarchy, at least for most psychologists. And these are them. One of the first ones is belonging. Now, I'm going to say them in an order. It is not the order of most importance. We'll talk about importance later. But this is one of the 6. Essentially, do I belong to a crew that I want to belong to? Am I accepted? Research has shown that when we experience rejection by a group or an individual, or we anticipate being possibly rejected by an individual or a group, 6 different pain centers in the brain light up. Rejection equals pain. Yeah, as if we're experiencing physical pain. It's a core need. That's different, however, than improvement, which is the second core need. A sense of progress. This wonderful woman, researcher Teresa Amabile, she essentially was one of the first ones. Some of you have seen her TEDx talk. It's really worth seeing. Where essentially she did a bunch of research where she realized progress, people need to feel a sense of progress, but often they need to just be given the option to reflect on progress so that they remember that progress has been made. She did this by having a bunch of employees, a group that was the test group just went about their regular day, and another test group, at the end of the day, she had them in a journal write down what are the lessons from the day, what are the wins from the day. That's it. 5 minutes, done. It was the folks that essentially wrote down every day ways that they had made progress, however little, big, even if they were just as lessons. They actually long-term showed greater employee work motivation and engagement, better health indicators, like they actually showed low blood pressure, they slept better, overall they were happier, but their work wasn't different. It was just getting to connect with progress in their life and in their work. So, the third core need is choice, or I like to think of it as autonomy, decision-making power over the things that matter to us. In one of the many famous research studies, they found that in nursing homes, in theory, when you place a senior, right, an elderly person in a nursing home, shouldn't their health indicators get better because now they have wraparound care? They get access to nurses and all these different services versus before just living alone. Many of you know that, in fact, what they have found out is that placing someone in nursing care with no other interventions, just placing them in nursing care, can actually make their health indicators worse. Multiple researchers have found that this is often because we remove their autonomy. We essentially take away one of their core needs. And so other researchers have found that even if you just increase choice around 3 or more things, just even 3 things, like the way that their rooms are arranged, or maybe choice about when they eat, not just like you eat when we tell you to eat. Even small choices improved their mortality rates. Yeah, choice matters to humans. So it's one of the third core need. And then my favorite, fairness, a sense of equality. If you haven't yet, I have a TEDx talk that talks a lot more about this. It's like a whole thing. It's a lot of my work. But essentially what we know, both from studying certain monkeys, including these capuchin monkeys, chimps, as well as studying humans, we know that the brain is hardwired to always be scanning for whether fairness and equality is present in our environment. And if it is not, as in the study here, we will revolt. We will fight back. We are wired to do that. We are wired to protect equality and fairness. We'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit. The 5th of the 6 core needs is predictability, essentially certainty about key aspects of our future. Multiple parts of the brain are wholly focused, including the basal ganglia, fully focused just on trying to predict the future. In fact, many, and not maybe most, neuroscientists believe that the one thing that sets us apart from other animals is that we're constantly trying to predict the future. That's the thing that sets us apart. And if you think about it, across cultures, when we can't predict the future, we will find other cultural means to try to increase the feeling that we've made. Everything from psychics to clairvoyance, right? Like so many ways. Tea reading, yeah. This in particular, obviously, in 2020 has been hard with the pandemic, where so many of the things that we used to think were predictable, all of a sudden don't feel like that. So this might be feeling very true for you right now. Now, this is very different than the last final core need, which is status. So why do people wait in line, sometimes for 24, 36 hours, just to get a Louis Vuitton bag? Why do people insist on spending 4 times as much on a brand name, right? Luxury brand names, when in fact, even after they're told that that exact product they just bought was made in the same factory by the same workers as a $20 item? Yeah, they still continue buying the luxury brand item. It's because of status. Now, some people think of it as significance. Not just do I belong to a group, but in what way am I special? Am I significant in the group? Many people used to think that this was self-focused or selfish, or it meant that you were like a jerk. No, neurologically speaking, it's one of the things we all are constantly actually testing out. Where are we? We don't need to be the top dog, but we need to know that we're in some way important. We see this everything from competition, the Olympics. It takes so much money and years of, oh my God, to become an Olympic athlete just for a gold chain thing? No. It's for that very special significance that is awarded to you at the end of it, knowing that you are the best at something that matters to you, right? So competitiveness, all these different things, brand names, yes, luxury items, okay. Also, what we have started learning in the past about 7 years is that those who feel a high sense of status, they will perform better when they're asked to process more information. They will be able to do more complex thinking and problem solving. They also are able to focus better when they feel a heightened sense of status. And if they feel like that often, they will live longer. So yeah, it's not a small thing. And it makes sense then why it's one of the 6. Now, the thing is, these are in order right here of, so that I can form an acronym, BICEPS, right? That's how you can remember them. Each of us actually, based on our culture, our neurowiring, just ourselves in general, the culture we grew up in, the culture we're in now, we have our own set of hierarchy of these 6. But what we know is that all humans need a basic threshold of all 6 to be met in order for the PFC to perform at its best. Because if you think about it, if one of these is threatened, it means that the amygdala is always trying to figure out if to pull the PFC offline, the rational, complex thinking part of the brain. And so then the question is, now that we know there's 6, how essentially can we make sure that we at least self-advocate, plan, get strategic, and troubleshoot when they're off for ourselves? We'll also talk about how to do that for others at work. But first, let's think about ourselves. First, exercise, 2 minutes of quiet time. Which core needs do you feel currently, right now, maybe this week, this day, as specific as you want it to be? Which currently undernourished, or you can say straight up threatened? I want you to take 2 minutes to write it down. I'm going to actually mute myself so you can have perfect quiet. Perfect quiet, 2 minutes. So by the way, a very common one is right now predictability, right? COVID, maybe belonging, because you used to be able to hang out with your friends and family and coworkers, and now you can't in the way that you used to. That's an example of that. Okay, 2 minutes begin now. This is also a lovely time to write down questions to the right if you want to. Since we're going to have a Q&A at the end, you can capture those questions now while they're fresh in your mind. So one of the ways that we can use BICEPS to kind of take care of ourselves is often I really ask myself this question. So for example, if I'm just feeling extra like spazzy, frazzled, like all over the place, I'll be like, whoa. If I feel extra combative with my partner one morning, if I feel extra short on patience, it could be that I need some physiological basic needs, like I didn't sleep enough, okay. I'm hungry, I'm cranky, okay. But often if it keeps happening, I can be like, wait, 2 minutes, check on the biceps. Is there one of these that's actually just like extra undernourished? And often I'm like, oh, I miss my friends. I haven't gone to verbally process with them. I'm a verbal processor. It makes sense. It's harder now. I don't want to, right? Okay. It's a really important first step. Now, I want you to write down this homework because I'll give you a little time right now, but often you'll need more time for brainstorming. Because once you identify which core need might be feeling undernourished or straight threatened, you'll need to have some time to be like, and what might I do about it? And come up with multiple options for yourself. So essentially the question is, how might I set myself up for more? So for me, in April, as for many of us, this is early April, I noticed that predictability has never been a core need that I've ever said feels threatened. Really, like I've never had an issue. I'm like, I'll just go with whatever. Just like pew, 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 just like always shooting from my hip. Until April of 2020, when all of a sudden I was like, I don't, what just happened? And so it was the first time that I had to essentially ask the question, so it's new to me, but I'm going to need to brainstorm and get creative. How can I set myself up for greater predictability, knowing that I have lots of things that I just won't know about? I just can't predict. What are some ways that I can do that? And at the same time, I like a second level to this homework assignment, which is this next part. how can I at the same time also appreciate, take time to feel gratitude every week, if not daily, for the things that I do currently still receive, the core needs at a meeting. Now, a lot of you know about the research behind the neuropsychology of gratitude. It's one of the most powerful ways that we can actually take care of our brain is by checking in gratitude where it feels authentic, right? We don't want to like fake it and be like, I guess I'm thankful for, nope. So here's an example of a more recent one of mine. I realized, whoa, okay, things are feeling tough again. This was about a few weeks ago. In my notebook, I wrote down, okay, so how might I set myself up for more human connection, which is how I kind of felt the belonging part. How can I also continue contributing to social justice, right? Knowing that it's my job, but it's also this, and I'm feeling drained and burnt out. While at the same time, taking time to take stock that I still have a shit ton of choice and autonomy. Sorry for my language, but like really, right. Autonomy is my number one core need, by the way. And it was important for me, like, right, wait, I'm still an entrepreneur. I still I get that. Okay. Also, significance. I'm still a trainer. I get to be in front of people. That makes me feel special. I still get that. Right, that's true. I do still get that. Also, progress. I can move as fast as I want to on our projects. So maybe I need to acknowledge how I'm actually moving pretty fast and not keep pushing myself to go faster. Because actually, I don't need to go faster and still feel a sense of progress in my life. Okay, right. And so I took some time then. I gave it a day or two. I came back to these prompts. I thought about it in the shower where I do some of my best brainstorming. Okay, so that's your homework. Go ahead. I'm going to go back to this slide so you can transcribe this. You are going to get these like slides, but I want you to actually write them down right now. And if you have a few thoughts you can already scribble in, go ahead and do that. Let's take a minute for this. 1 minute. Okay, again, as questions come up, feel free to go ahead and add them to the chat window, sorry, to the Q&A. We'll get to them later, but we'll write them down for now. By the way, I'm not tracking the chat window, so if you're asking me stuff in there, just know Elaine's on it. We'll get to it later. Make sure that sometimes people are like asking me questions in there and I'm like, I can't see them because I'm looking at my slides. Okay, so there's a second way that we can use this. It's a second way, which is essentially, well, before we get to focusing on others and work, we can also think of long-term planning, because often the core needs that are currently threatened or undernourished for us are not actually the ones that we need to plan long-term with. And that's where I had you do that first exercise. So we're going to pick up where we left off in the opening reflective prompt, right? The question of what are the 2 to 3 favorite jobs you've ever had? And I really truly mean, like for me, one of my favorite jobs was when I was for 3 months, I was a grocery store cashier at a very, very, very busy grocery store. Still one of my favorite jobs. And this is important for this exercise. So if you didn't finish that list, you'll have time now. And those of you who already have those, then you can move on to write down 2 to 3 jobs that you've ever had where you felt you were withering away. So for me, instantly I think of, I had a job exactly for 2 days working at a company as a data entry person. I was in, I think, a closet. I think it was like their closet, one of their closets, with a little desk. I saw no one the whole day except when I entered the building and exited. I guess maybe during lunch in the hallways. And the rest of the time I was in front of a computer with a long piece of paper that I had to enter. I thought I was gonna die. Yeah, so that would be one of the ones that would go on my list. So do that next, and we're gonna build on this. Don't worry about the biceps just yet. For now, do that. 2 minutes now. And then whenever you're ready, move on to this part. Which core needs, now that you think about it, were actually really nourished in those favorite jobs? You're like, oh, which core needs were threatened or malnourished in those least favorite jobs, or the ones that left you feeling just withering away? They might be totally different, but you might start seeing some patterns. So go ahead and write that down now. So what I found really helpful about long-term planning, so obviously it's helpful in short-term urgencies, kind of like something's feeling off, but also one of the things I realized is about maybe 5 years ago, I did kind of a biceps check about my long-term career goals. And I realized that I still hadn't addressed the fact that I knew that autonomy was my number one core need. Like really, I will willingly give up many of the others as long as my core need of autonomy is not threatened. And sometimes we have to do that, but usually you try to go to get all of them, right? Or as many as you can. And so what I realized was like, wait, why do I keep trying to angle, right, working for companies when in the end, the thing that kills me the most is bureaucracies or a boss that doesn't understand my work having the final say? It kills me. And that's when I was like, I think we got to start thinking more seriously about entrepreneurship, owning my own business, running my own thing, because maybe that is how to get this core need met. So I changed my goals, made instead of being like, get an amazing job, be like, what if we move towards entrepreneurship? And here I am 5-6 years later, and I will never go back. Because I was like, yes, yes. When all else fails, at least I'll still have my autonomy. At the same time, I also recognized that status was a really important core need for me, one of my top ones. And instead of feeling ashamed or like a bad person, being like, why do I always need, I was like, okay, well, how are you going to have a job where you get to feel significant, where you're not always hiding in the background behind the scenes? There are some of you who actually do really well in those roles. I am not one of those folks. And so hence training, owning my own business, right? Right, that core need will get addressed there. Okay, I can long-term plan instead of trying to fight my brain. I can incorporate what I know seems to be true about me. And of course, belonging. I knew that I couldn't be solitary, that I have quite a few friends who kept telling me, you should just become an author. Oh my gosh, it's so awesome. You get all this status because you're the author, right? You get all the choice you want pretty much once you find a good publisher. And I was like, yeah, but then I'm just like at my house all day alone. No, I know that belonging is too important to me. I need lots of human interaction. So here I am, a trainer, right? Okay. So at some point, though, I hope you're already wondering, okay, so I can use BICEPS to start supporting myself and my own well-being, right, and psychological safety at work. But I also might be able to think about how to support other people and their core needs at work. And I say this to you, even if you're not a manager, if you're not a team lead, if you're not a project lead, just as a coworker. Now, one of the things that we need to, the way to support others is by acknowledging two hard facts. One, everyone has their own hierarchy, right? As we just, the things that we just explored, everyone has their own hierarchy. Everyone needs all six, but some will need even more of than our coworker. Even if we're both designers from Mexico, both female in our 40s, it doesn't matter. We're each gonna need our own hierarchy of those needs. So this may seem obvious because we just did that exercise, right? But actually what I've learned is that it's not. People kept seeing like, well, I gave them all the autonomy in the world. I'm like, okay, did they want all the autonomy in the world? Have you asked them what they want? And then later they'd come back, in these coaching sessions, they'd be like, oh, they wanted more predictability. I don't need that. I don't get that. I'm like, cool. It's not about getting them. It's about now knowing in the ways that you're different and what they need. Okay. And secondly, it's important to note that when we talk about equity and inclusion, what we often mean is that not everyone in the society gets equal access to all of the core needs. The brain is very skilled at scanning constantly. Is it fair? Who gets instantly included? Who gets instantly invited to, parties, to happy hours? I mean, at this point, that might be a bit different, but is it fair who gets asked for their advice all the time and whose opinion gets ignored? Signals of belonging. Is it fair who gets the projects where there's a ton of progress? Is it fair who essentially gets decision-making power or a promotion that gives them more decision-making power? Is that fair? And then of course, equality, right? Essentially, that's what all these are about. Is it fair who essentially has high levels of predictability or more predictability period? Is it fair who gets the jobs, the projects where it's not constantly changing? And of course, is it fair who gets the most prized titles, the most, what are they called, high visibility projects? Is it fair? So we can't know for sure how people are feeling if things are fair without first getting to know which core needs matter even more to them. One of the ways that we receive signals that we are included is when people seem interested, not in the way that we confirm one of their stereotypes about us, but when those folks seem interested in how we are unique. What's special about us? And our hierarchy of BICEPS is one of the ways we're unique. So I'm going to walk you through an exercise that is straight up what I've done with every team that I've ever led, including the ones that I was just a performance coach for. That is my favorite. It's really straightforward, but it's just an example. You might want to take it and tweak it. You might want to ignore it and make up your own, but this way you know that it is really this simple. Getting to know other people's core needs isn't as like conceptual as it sounds. So imagine that you either are the project lead, or you are the manager or the leader, or imagine that you're just a team member, or, part of that project, and that you suggest, hey, would you mind if I led a weird meeting to kind of rally the troops and really get to know each other? Because anyone can lead a meeting, even if you're not the project lead. So imagine that you do that, and essentially you prep the team this way. You email everyone the BICEPS PDF. Here's a link, just a PDF. You'll get it after, obviously you'll get that link, and you ask them in the email to take time to think about or write down their answers to these questions. A, which of the two core needs are feeling great at work right now? And what is one example of each? That's it. And then B, different question, which one or two of these core needs do you wish felt better at work? I have done this exact thing with people that I thought were just going to laugh at me, like infrastructure engineers. I just thought they were going to be like, are you what? You're going to have us what? And all of them, when I sent the email, many of them emailed back one-on-one being like, where did you get this? This is fascinating. I was like, neuroscientists? They came up with all the research. I just made a PDF. I've never had someone, I still get fan mail from people being like, what? The least likely people that you think. Because finally, often it just makes sense to them. They're like, that's what's going on with me, or that's what's going on with my teenage daughter, right? Okay, so email them. I promise no one's gonna look at you funny. And then let them know that you're gonna be sharing the answers at a team meeting in the future. You decide when, because you wanna make sure that everyone's getting what they need to do their best work. If you want to, you can feel free to elaborate on that. Be like, I went to this thing. They talked about how, in fact, core needs are required for high performance at work. If they're threatened, we're not going to perform as well because we're under chronic stress. So first, we should just get to know how we're doing, because each of us are different. And that's it. At the meeting, give everyone 2 minutes. Weirdly, it's enough time. In a round robin, we can do that virtually, to share their answers first to the first question, A. Have everyone share which are the things that are feeling really good at work, which core needs. And one example, let them know you got 2 minutes. People are usually pretty efficient with it. You'll want to know what are examples, because what I've learned about humans is that the way the core needs manifest for each person is also unique. So for me, when I think of belonging, and in the past, the way it's felt nourished, or maybe how it currently feels nourished, is in small one-on-one or two, like trio conversations. If I go to a party, I will not in any way get my sense of belonging met. It's just overwhelming. I'm just like, I feel isolated. In fact, I feel smaller. I feel disconnected. It's too many people. Many of you are the reverse. One-on-one conversations feel fine, but you miss parties. You miss big groups of your crew together in the same room. Okay. How belonging manifests and all of the other core needs for each of us is different. And that's one of the ways that we can get to know each other. It's like, oh, okay. And then after everyone's done a round robin, I say it like this as if we're still meeting in person, but I should say like this for Zoom. Once everyone has done the round robin and you go through everyone, then be like, okay, now into the second question. Everyone has 2 minutes to share your answers to B. At that point, people will be a little bit safer because they've heard from everyone. A little trust is built that it's okay to talk about these things, and they can say the harder answer, which is like, belonging's feeling a little rough lately, or like predictability, or like actually status. I feel like I used to get to speak at all staff meetings and I didn't realize how much that mattered to me, and I don't get to do that anymore. So that's been rough. There is zero judgment that is required of anyone here. You're really just getting to be like, oh, that's how that core need shows up for you. And that's the one that feels really important right now. Cool. Now, you may not know if it's their long-term kind of core need or if it's just a current urgent core need, right? Because that changes. But the point is, you can start actually thinking about then brainstorming how to support each other through it. Now, at that point, there's a few tips. because many people find that just that exercise changes the whole vibe of the team, even in some of the most toxic team environments. But many of you are like, what's next now that we know this, right? One, begin brainstorming. Begin brainstorming how you might support each other. Do not put it on the manager or the leader to do it all for you. And two, do not treat the biceps as if they are binary. The limbic brain wants to treat them as binary. Like, do I have them or not have them? Are they threatened or not threatened? But actually, they're a little bit more on a spectrum. Sometimes improvement's feeling okay, like a 3 out of 5. And some days it's a 1 out of 5, right? And for some of us, so my predictability can actually be like a 2 out of 5. I can kind of chug along fine. I'm fine. 1 out of 5, too low. For someone else, my sister, who I grew up attached at the hip to her, we're almost twins, like really. Predictability is one of her biggest core needs. And so she needs it to be like a 3 or a 4 out of 5 a lot more often than I do. And the point is, it's not that the job of our coworkers or our manager is to provide us a 5 out of 5. It's that the question is, how might we move in the right direction? How might we increase that by 1 this week or this month? And that all of a sudden will free the brain to feel not so overwhelmed by the solutions that you have to come up with. Which leads me to the second tip. Get creative. We are living in one of the most unpredictable years that many of us have ever faced in our lives, right? Everything just keeps changing on us. And so this is a beautiful year to let that imagination run, because you can't just default to like, oh, we'll just have more happy hours, because maybe they never worked for anyone to begin with. For all you know, they only worked for 3 out of 10 of you. And the rest of you were like, I don't even drink. This is awkward. So get creative. I've had teams that I said, okay, let's take 10 minutes to figure out. I'm gonna let you watch this because it's kind of scary, but not. Oh. Yeah, let me explain. I've had teams that essentially were like, it sounds like for many of us, belonging is really hard now that we've switched to a virtual team. I guess that's just what it is. And I was like, whoa. Let's brainstorm for 10 minutes. Everyone has to come up with 7 ideas for ways to create a sense of connection despite the virtual setup. Despite this virtual setup, or maybe via the virtual setup. And one of the things they came up with, there was many things they came up with that were amazing. One of the things was like, hey, in one of the meetings I used to go to many years ago with a different team, we started, which was a virtual, like geographically distributed team. In order to feel that connection with the folks that were joining them remotely, every staff meeting started where we would take turns. Everyone had, they would take turns sharing a 2-minute or shorter video that was one of their favorite things on the internet. And then they would say why it was their favorite thing. And that's how essentially we got to know that one of the people that we knew was obsessed with videos of animals parenting another species of animal. That was his thing. He was like, I don't know, I'm just obsessed with these. And it became this point of connection. On Slack, they would send them little gifts. We think that belonging is about like hugging all the time and like standing next to each other and like getting to know. It also is those things, but often belonging is about a high frequency of little tiny connections that are unique between you and that person or just within the team. And so, yeah, seriously, YouTube videos, starting the team that way, taking turns, giving a little glimpse, right? It could just be, obviously this is just a GIF. Tiny, huge impact. Improvement, another example of this getting creative is they were talking about how because everything was up in the air, all of a sudden all their milestones and their timelines were totally thrown off, and now they felt like they were making no progress. We talked about, me and the manager talked about Teresa Amabil's work and the progress principle. She's like, so I have everyone journal, and I was like, you could, what else? She remembered that one of the things she learned about was dot tracking. So for every day that you do a thing that is a kind of progress, you can say every day that we write 5 pages of new content, every day that we hit, 200 likes or whatever, 1,000 likes on our, whatever your thing is, right? Every day that you get a thing, that you do a thing, you give yourself a dot, like on a calendar or like on the wall. Seriously, it's that simple. The team tried it out and they fell in love with it. They would show each other's calendar, be like, today I got da-da-da, I hit this many like words that I, typed up for the blah, blah, blah. Whatever is your metrics that are show progress, there's lots of ways to do it. And you can essentially show each other and be like, here it is, look, I got 6 more today, yeah, just check in. Remember, perception of progress is all that matters to the brain. There's a third one I want to share with you because it hits 3 and 6. Oops, sorry, I just kicked my chair, which is choice, predictability, and status. So this is essentially what I've shown you here. This is essentially something called a Zero circle, or sometimes called a circle of influence. Point is, it's 2 circles. Like right now, I want you to try it. Write down, like draw 2 circles about this ratio. And in the center, what this team did is they collectively said, what if, I think it was once every other week. I don't think it was weekly. Maybe it was once it was once a week during their, what they called the war room period. So they were launching a really big controversial project internally at the company. And for the first 4 weeks, the first 2 weeks or something of the launch, they met every day. It was like that intense of a project. And so every day they checked in on their influence, their control circles. And every day they would take 2 minutes, everyone would quietly, and then they would report in. In the center, people wrote in, in the bigger circle is, what are things that feel really rough, hard, concerning, frustrating, angering, upsetting right now about how the project's going? And just write it out, just like fill in that circle, the big red circle. Take 2 deep breaths. And then we took another 2 minutes-ish quiet time to fill in the center circle. What is under our control about those things? And that's where they said, well, I guess how we keep communicating with our audience, the way we update them, maybe which channels we use. We have tried different channels to communicate with them and keep that vibe good with our audience. Maybe it's asking leadership for more support. Maybe it's extending a deadline. We could do that. Maybe, like all of the ways that we have control, we forget when we feel under threat. But we might just need a little time to remind ourselves. We can do that individually. We can do that as a team. So again, I think for those first 2 weeks, they did it daily. I think after that, they just went back to doing maybe quarterly. But the reason they loved it, this is my theory, is because we know about this circle of influence, or the Zorro circle. By the way, that's Zorro, like the masked swords person, like Zorro. It's a whole mythology thing. Anyway, the point is, what we know is that it seems to help increase a sense of choice because it reminds you what you have choice over. 2, it clarifies what is predictable because what's under your control is what's predictable. And all of a sudden it's visually there. You're like, right, all this, that's not quite as predictable, but how I respond to it, which choice I make, how I strategize, whose help I request, that's predictable. I can choose those things. And thirdly, we theorize that it helps with status because it reminds us the ways in which we are unique, the skills we have that we can add into that center circle. All of those things are true and make us feel a little prouder, right? A little more confident. Oh, right, I've got a crew. I haven't asked them for help. You know why I have a crew? Because I built that crew. I worked on having that community. I can feel good about that significance. Cool. Okay. So we've covered 2 tips about how we support others and ourselves in the workplace. The third one is really check in with this regularly. Again, every team I've had in the past few years since I've kind of discovered BICEPS as this, list, I have a quarterly meeting with the team. They get very used to it. After a while, it gets really fast and really efficient. Where essentially it's a quarterly BICEPS check-in. That's what we call it. That's what it says on the schedule. Every quarter, check in on the exact same agenda. What are 2 things that are feeling really great as far as the core needs, and what are examples of that? Everyone goes, and then the next round robin is what's 1 or 2 things that I think need a little work and are feeling pretty threatened or undernourished at work. Sometimes because people get so comfortable, right, discussing these emotional lives at work, there are times when people are like, actually, no core needs are met at, that would suck. No core needs are threatened right now at work. If things are feeling pretty stable, feeling really thankful for that. They give everyone props for like, right, great, I love my coworkers, but they'll say like, I guess if it's okay to say there's something happening in my personal life that's really this, or like maybe my dad is sick and that's been really upsetting me, my sense of predictability and belonging. I've seen how teams all of a sudden, teams that before I never thought would ever talk about such personal things, start sharing a lot more with each other, which is an indicator of psychological safety at work. They don't overshare, none of that happens. They just share enough so that their coworkers know, I didn't realize that was going on for you. How can we help? Can we take some work on for you this week? Like that is what's next, very easy for teams to do. So, okay. I've talked at you for long enough. I actually went under on time, so I think that leaves us a little more time for essentially your questions. So I'm gonna leave the slides up so that I can scroll through them because I want you to, so actually I'll do it right now. I want you to feel comfortable asking as early on. So I'm actually gonna hopefully not make you like car sick, nauseous, but everything from starting with some of the basics all the way to stuff at the end. Q&A.
Paloma, while people are writing in their questions, I would love back at the beginning when you shared BICEPS and you were talking about improvement and you highlighted someone that talked at the TEDx Atlanta. Can you say her name again?
Yes, Teresa Amabil. So I believe it's A-M-I, sorry, A-I-B. I just need to write it down, hold on. Okay, so A, M as in Mary, I, B as in boy, I, L as in Larry, E, I believe.
Okay. All right. That's enough for us to Google it. Thanks so much.
The lovely thing is you can Google her TEDx. She has a whole book and it's called The Progress Principle, which is really cool too.
All right. All righty. I'm not seeing questions showing up in the Q&A, so I don't know if that means they're not coming or if we're having technical difficulties, but I will check the chat box. Oh, somebody's included it. Thank you so much, Melody and Van.
Oh, I spelled it right, Melody. My spelling, when I was in 3rd to 4th grade, I was a spelling bee champion, and then it just went away. Like I just went downhill. Never returned to my.
But you're still holding on to that status, it sounds like, Paloma.
Seriously, I was like, does it count? It was a long time ago, but
It counts.
it counts, I think.
It counts.
I once didn't suck at it. How's that? Yeah, neurologically, I'm obsessed with why that happens. Memory changes so much. Anyway, go on. Yes.
No. I was going to ask Elaine if she saw questions coming up or if it was a Lori user problem.
I did not see anything in the chat box, but we do have a new question in the Q&A box now.
All right. Go ahead and read it for us, Elaine.
Sure. Kat asks, what do you suggest for teams who have chronically low levels of connection who might use the exercise you suggested around biceps to call each other out?
I love this question. So I've implemented this with some of the most toxic teams ever, and I've never seen them do it. I don't know why. I mean, I was ready. I was like ready as a facilitator to be like, okay, I'm gonna cut. It's important. There's a few tips for really, really, I don't always want to call them toxic teams. Let's say, because
dysfunctional.
Well, let's say that there are toxic dynamics, right? Because the team is a toxic. That there are some dynamics that got toxic. So there are some few tips, like for example, having the leader be the first one to share their answers sets the stage. If you trust the leader, also having them read articles about it beforehand. So there is one team of engineers that was pretty toxically competitive with each other, and we're constantly trying to bring, just like constantly vying for number one spot. And I was pretty terrified that they would use this somehow against each other. They never did. I I think they began with a lot of like, well, here's how, you know, but it was like self-aggrandizing.
Mm-hmm.
No one else, because of, let me actually get to that. I mean, there's always a first. I'm not, I just have weirdly never seen it. It's one of the reasons I love it as a exercise. So I'm actually going to get to this. Okay. So when you see, 1 second, I'm actually going to move it so I can read my slides at the same time. When you see the which core needs, the second part of question A, how do they show up? There are times when in the email, I actually give my example as either the facilitator or the project lead or the manager or the person who's going to be leading the team through this exercise, so that it also normalizes the kind of answer as not too conceptual. You know, like my answers will be really specific, like, hey, my core need of belonging feels really good this week in particular because Robbie sent me this email from a compliment. That's a compliment from our clients. And we had this really fun like laughter moment because it was such a sweet email. And I reminded myself that I just need to laugh with my coworkers more. Like that's specific, not just like, because I laughed today, you know? So be as specific as possible. That said, if you have a particular question, feel free to, you know, send a question to me privately in the chat window. That's always a possibility if you're like, yeah, but really, I would presume, I would rather at this point, based on my experience, enter presuming that people will actually show up. And by the time everyone does their round robin for the second question, there will be a new sense of trust. Not all trust will be rebuilt, but it'll be very like the dynamic will shift, and then take it from there, then try to overprotect for it, if that helps.
Paloma, I think that's great. I love that last bit about overprotecting. I also value the question that if we do work in toxic environments or on teams where there's not a lot of psychological safety, it can feel really overwhelming to imagine starting something like this. This is the first time I've seen you introduce the concept of BICEPS, and part of how I imagine a hypothesis of why this works so well is because for those who do like predictability, you're still giving some people a framework. You're not saying, we're going to have a meeting and you need to identify your core needs. And like people have to identify those on their own. And then that would be really overwhelming for a lot of people. But you're sending them information ahead of time and you're giving them a menu of these 6 things, which I think even if you haven't sat through a workshop with you, they resonate with people, right? Like they make sense. And it's backed in science. It's not just this touchy-feely exercise where I'm going to need to talk about how you hurt my feelings. So I think the fact that you really give people this framework about the needs, you ask for something really specific, that only the worst among us who are highly passive-aggressive or just plain aggressive, I think your average person at work is going to show up with best intentions to try to be honest. Or they're going to make themselves look like an ass if they don't.
Yeah, I mean, I really have led some pretty toxic environment teams through this, and they really don't. Here's the thing. I forgot to mention, I do always give them a heads up and prepare them that the final question is going to be, how might we support each other? And then give them 2 minutes of quiet time to brainstorm. Yeah. Not how am I going to support you? I'm just a facilitator. You don't even know me. Who knows if I'll be back, you know? You've got each other, maybe, hopefully in the future more and more. That last one is actually a pretty important one. I really think, I mean, I guess I want to encourage folks to consider that even the most jerkish, aggressive or passive aggressive person at work is likely doing that because they're so used to not having the core needs understood, thus not met at work. Their amygdala is always on alert. And that's what we know about humans is one way. So like, you remember the pandas? Yeah, right? They're either always like, or they're always just like, what's up, what's up, what's up, right? Like, so I think often people are like, whoa. I first started doing this with nurse teams. nurse teams that were super burnt out, had everything stacked against them, and were often really, really mean to each other in ways that I had never seen before. And we did this with a few of them, and it was always surprising how often the most passive aggressive or aggressive them were the first ones to be like, I'll help you with that. I know what that's like. I'll help you with that. Like, I think we could do this. And I was like, they essentially had a new way to channel that energy. Everybody wants to feel hopeful as long as it doesn't feel like it's going to threaten them back. So
Yes.
that's my hope.
Yeah, I love that. I could riff on that for a long time, but we've got some great questions coming in. Okay, I'll read this one to you. I'm excited about doing BICEPS meeting at my work. Thank you so much for teaching it to us. One thing I know will be raised by people is equity, because people at work have already reached out to me personally about not feeling they are compensated fairly. Have you experienced situations around this? And do you have any suggestions for how to approach these conversations when the amount people are compensated are out of everyone's who's in the room's control?
Yeah, I mean, they probably are being compensated unequally. I mean, we know that compensation equity is incredibly, incredibly rampant in all industries, unless interventions and changes have happened. So let's just like say the truth. I'm not going to lie about that. So it is likely that they have their hunch is accurate. So trying to be like, no, that's not, is I don't think authentic and honest. However, I would say compensation equity is often the beginning conversations of moving towards it, are often by folks most impacted by it via things like the psychology of influence, persuasion, and change management. They're not HR, they're not leaders, they're not VPs, they're not directors, but they essentially help influence like, hey, doesn't this matter to us? So feel free to find me afterwards if you want tips. I teach entire workshops on the psychology of influence on behalf of equity and inclusion so that anyone can be a change maker and an influencer. I mean, you know, anyone we know now can be an influencer. So, which is cool. So one, if that matters deeply to you and if it matters deeply to that person, so sometimes people will come to me with that in like coaching and one-on-one sessions when I used to do coaching and be like, this is the thing I'm pretty sure isn't fair. And my question would be like, cool, do you need to vent about it and just say this sucks and I wish I could fix it? Or do you want coaching on how to move towards influencing the company or your department to look into all the ways that compensation can become more equitable? And you get to choose either, because it's not your job to become an influencer on this. But for some of you, many people are like, actually, I guess I presumed I didn't have control. And I was like, well, no one has complete control, like really. But any one of us can influence it more than others. And some of us just have to work harder at the influence part, which is fair. You can say, no, I just need to vent. This sucks. And often we forget how we can listen to a coworker, listen to a peer, be an ally and be like, it does suck. It actually is hurting your brain to have this fear or this concern, especially because you can't usually, you can't usually prove it right or wrong because it's currently so not transparent in most companies. So
well, it also makes me think, Paloma, that for the person asking the question, if you're going to do the BICEPS thing and that person is anticipating that a lot of people will say, I'm feeling threatened by the lack of equity around compensation. So one is that by doing this meeting and checking in with other people, well, now you're going to have data that, we did this BICEPS meeting to identify core needs and we asked everyone to share 2. And now you're able to say, this percentage of people brought up inequity around compensation as a primary barrier to trust here at work. And so now you have data to move that forward. Then the other thing you have is if you're asking them to identify 2, you're also going to learn about something else. And this is not just a one and done conversation, right? Like I love this idea of applying the Zorro circle as well. And maybe the people in this meeting, it is beyond their control to talk about salaries or bonuses, et cetera. So that goes there as something that's upsetting and frustrating and irritating. But how can we focus on what is in our control so that we can feel like we're working towards greater equity overall?
Yeah, but I also want to push back on that.
Okay, good.
Really, like really, all of us, no matter who we are. I mean, I say this as someone who's done this and who has coached others. Any one of us can start and take care of seeds about specific inequities in our workplace.
Mhm.
So I've been the person who's very specifically was told by two different directors, one VP and the CEO, that's not your job, Paloma,
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
inequity, specific inequity in the workplace. And I was
Yeah.
like, got it, I'm pushing in the wrong direction. Okay. And I like retreated, re-strategized, got data. Who else is feeling this way? Like what do we, why? What are the different ways? I went and researched all of the ways that inequity other companies have addressed, what it looks like, how long it takes, how much it costs. I built a business plan, right? I realized they don't want just me to be like, I don't think things are ankle here. Turns out that didn't
Mhm.
work for them. Okay, tried a different way. And then all of a sudden, I think it took me a year and a half in that case, I got the project. It was not in my role, it was not in my job description. I cared enough about it. So I really, and I've coached lots of people, many of you on this, right, on this call, I want to give you props. You have been those people that plant those seeds being like,
Mhm.
wouldn't it be cool if we walked the talk around compensation? I could lead a
Mhm.
research project just to research options. I would do it on the side on my own. Many of you already do that. And I just,
Mhm.
compensation is not untouchable. It
Yes.
truly isn't. And so
Mhm.
that said, I want to second what you said, though, Lori, that it's okay if you're like, I'm going to put it outside of my control circle and that I don't want to touch it. I just want to
Yeah.
feel sad, scared. I want to feel the feelings. I don't want to keep it in my control circle. That's not, I got other fish to fry. That's fair
Yeah.
too. That's fair
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Thanks so much for that clarification. And
yeah.
yeah, I absolutely agree, right? That like we need to really be honest about where our self-agency is and where our locus of control is. And there are days where we feel overwhelmed and we feel like we are too small. And that's where we need, that sticky note on our computer, I can plant seeds today. I may not ever see them harvested, but I can still plant the seeds, and I can also find other people to plant the seeds with me so that I'm not feeling so alone in this process.
Yeah.
There's another question here. How would you recommend getting C-level leadership buy-in to implement BICEPS check-ins when their focus is to just keep on grinding at work, creating a bit of a burnout culture that originates from the top?
Such a lovely question. So one of the best ways is to essentially pivot it small, pilot it small, pilot it small in a way that doesn't affect other folks. So I've had teams that, for example, they were like, well, we can try it at our tiny team meeting. We're just 6 people. And then essentially, to Lori's point, then we'll have data points. We'll say, hey, so we tried this weird thing and we saw engagement go up. We've seen like collect metrics that you think leadership cares about. If they don't care about grinding at work, I mean, even if they say that, what do they care about? Money or whatever, their values, social impact, whatever. They care about a reason that they think grinding at work is going to give them. So just often you can align essentially your data points. So many times we'll start off being like the little experimenters, the guinea pigs, and then we'll have data points being like, actually, this totally helped us. Or like, we have seen decreased burnout, and decreased burnout, research shows, is actually one of the best ways to have increased innovation, which is linked with profits in our industry. Just like connect some dots, use data, don't lie, do a little research. There's what we all hear probably, which is why you're on this call, right? What we all know is that emotional health at work leads to performance, and performance leads to profits and revenue, which is another way of saying leads to financial sustainability for the place that's employing you, that's giving you a paycheck. So of course we all care about it. We don't not care about money. We want to stay employed too and have, right? Yay. So I think there's more shared, if you can align it, if you can pilot small, experiment small, get some data points and align it with things that you all care about together. I don't think you need to convince the CEO or C-level to implement it company-wide first. Also, what I've seen is that the way engineers implement this is slightly different than the way some designers implement it, which is different than the way the nurses implemented it. And so you might want to see what it's like in your company and what tweaks you make before then you go and recommend it. But essentially, build a business case, however little that business case might be. And feel free to, find me afterwards. Yeah, hope that helps.
Listening to you talk about that makes me think too, Paloma, around if people were to have this list of BICEPS, and then if their company has a list of core values or vision mission statements, et cetera, that we know that our influence increases if we talk the company language, or if we know what other leaders or other authority figures, right? If we know what their values are, if I'm like, oh, I'm gonna bring this up to Stacy and status is probably really important to her, or I'm gonna bring this up with John and I know autonomy is super critical to him. So I'm gonna be like, I think that autonomy is, based on our conversations, that seems really relevant to you. I'd love if I could float this idea past you about BICEPS. Will you look at it? And then I'd love to talk about blah, 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 right? So we can use the language and value systems of where we work, which is totally unique to the different people that are on this call.
Yes, that is very true. Align it to the things you already have said the company or leadership is committed to.
Right.
I mean, don't lie, but often you're right. They're like, hey, we've been talking about diversity and equity for 3 years now, and I've heard that this is one of the easiest, cheapest, costs nothing besides 20 minutes at a staff meeting sometimes, right?
Yeah.
In order to give it, and it can be optional. Teams can opt in if they feel like they have the time this month. They can opt out. Essentially address their concerns and then address their goals and how this aligns with it. I mean, really what I love is that the more that I learned about the psychology of influence and persuasion, the more that I was like, oh, this is building a business case. Mm-hmm. It's like just a different way of talking about what I learned about building business cases, that people will be like, yes, I will invest in that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
As you were first presenting the BICEPS model, what my journal here is like, oh my gosh, this is so similar to what's in the SCARF model. SCARF is the acronym, if people are familiar with that in David Rock's work. And basically it includes everything, maybe with some different words, except for Teresa Mibbles, or however you say her last name, bit around the improvement and the sense of progress. And so I think if people are building the business case, if they need to do this BICEPS thing in their teams, that to also include, there's other research out there, right? You've done all the hard work of culminating the research and saying this is what folks are saying. But folks can also look up the SCARF model. There's a lot online about that. And it also reminds me of Dan Pink's work. And he has that really great little short RSA. He's the author of Drive, where he talks about once you pay people at an equitable level, what really keeps us motivated at work is that we have the right level of autonomy that we need, a clear sense of purpose, and we're working within our zone of mastery. And I found a lot of techies and engineers and executives really open to that, and that absolutely dovetails with your work.
Yeah, and in the BICEPS PDF that folks, that weirdly is actually on this slide right now, this one right here on this slide, that actually at the bottom says, here's where you can read more about the research. So absolutely, because some of you might know, I started most of my BICEPS kind of educational work in the tech world, where people were like, if you can't prove it with metrics, it doesn't exist,
right.
And so I was like, got it. Here's the science. So you were right. Talk their language, speak their language. There's something called the authority heuristic, which Laura, you kind of spoke to. Essentially, who do they find authority figures, or which industry or which field do they find to be authority figures? And if those folks have spoken well about the thing that you want to convince folks about, then connect it. In your case, if you know that they think scientists are the bestest people ever, then make sure that you clarify and it's just one of the reasons why the PDF is like, here's the scientist that actually did the work. I just made an acronym that's Creative Commons license.
Yeah, love it.
But here's the science, you're right, because most of some audiences are like, oh, there's fMRIs about this.
Right.
Sure.
Well, and to just explicitly name this, I mean, I like David Rock's work, and I like Daniel Pink's work. And there are a lot of white men out there doing a lot of great work, and it'd be nice to also cite and share other folks' works. But for a lot of us, especially, you know, I also work in the tech industry, the folks that I'm working with are also other white, cis, straight men. And so sometimes we hear it best from people that look like us. So it's important that we have lots of references, right? And I like your concept of authority heuristic. I want to get to this last question here.
Yes.
Can we reach out to you, Paloma, about company training for the new year? I know your website says you are very booked, and I want to be respectful of your time and inbox.
Such a nice question.
It is.
I am really booked. Speaking of biceps and addressing my own core needs as my own boss, I would say maybe into the new year, maybe like in February. But check my website. That's where I'll always update it when I'm taking new work. I prioritize the current clients I have since we have a relationship, and they often, you know, but do reach out to me, because I have a growing list of total badass trainers, facilitators, coaches, consultants that I'm referring folks to. I'm so excited that and I'll let you know which ones are taking new work and stuff like that, because I know that some of us, other colleagues of mine, also are booked into the new year. But so do reach out to me. Absolutely. There's a contact form on my website, and let me know what kind of, like, be as specific as you can be in your email. And that way I can kind of recommend you, or we can jump on a call and I can help you connect with the right person. So I'm happy to help, but I'm not going to lie. I'm not sure until maybe in February I'll know.
Awesome. Thank you, Paloma.
Yeah.
One more
Self-care.
question for you here. What advice do you have for leaders who are onboarding new employees and working remotely? How might we apply BICEPS or some of what we've learned with you today in that situation?
Yes. So when you, there are folks such as Lara Hogan, so Lara, last name Hogan, if you already know her work. We like overlap all, we're close friends. We share a lot of work. She does a ton of stuff around biceps, but she's really lovely in that she has a bunch of blog posts that you can look up where she talks about onboarding and all of the ways in which, I believe all of the ways in which she recommends. One of them includes asking, as one of the first 6 questions you ask a new employee as their manager, is the biceps question. Like, hey, which of these matter most to you in your first month here? And how are those going? And then like 2 weeks later into their second week, being like, and how are those going? You know, like obviously support them and how to address them, but more importantly, create a space in your one-on-ones. There are, I believe there's at least 2 client companies I've worked with that built some version of the biceps question, like, hey, which of these matter first to you that we should know about, into the manager onboarding playbooks that they give managers. So that's a way to systematize a thing. Managers don't have to use it. They can ignore whatever questions they want from the playbook, right? And the tips that are in there. But that way you're saying, this is a way that we do things here, that we encourage you to think about your reports, not just as like, you know, designers or engineers or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
And they all work virtually.
Excellent. Okay, Lara Hogan, we got another resource. Just one, we're basically at time. Anything, Paloma, like you've given us so many great things to chew on and to practice. I love the self-reflective exercise, which of course helps us to build self-awareness and slow ourselves down just a little bit. Is there anything as people are departing that you really want folks to walk out the door with, that last little nugget of gold to send us away?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that to not presume that others have the same hierarchy of core needs, either presently, that both of you are experiencing the same moment the same. You're not, you know? And 2, to not presume that the core needs you've taken for granted are always given to you, maybe because of your demographics, are given to everyone equally. Some people have to fight so much harder to get tiny fraction of a core need that has been given to you a lot more freely, and that's one of the ways of thinking of inequity. So I think just knowing that like both things are true, but that it's not super hard to make these conversations normal. I promise. I've just never introduced the biceps model to someone who was like, what?
Yeah.
People, all kinds of people have been like, ah. I mean, that's because of all the brilliant researchers, right? Who've made this, who've just kind of like demystified ourselves to ourselves. So.
Thank you so much, Paloma. This is where we all stand up in our living rooms across Portland and the country, and we give you a standing ovation, and we feel like you've seen us and you've given us super practical tools, and we're excited to go out and use them. Thanks also to Elaine and 52. To all of you, look for a follow-up email. Elaine will get it out to you probably this afternoon. It includes the slides from today, upcoming webinars and services, and you'll also find the link in there for Ciara Pressler's workshop, which will be on November 12th, and some updates on who our speakers will be in the Cultivating Psychological series through the next year, but the ones that will be identified are through February of 2021. So thank you so much, Paloma. Make sure you check out all of this gratitude pouring in the chat box and sending you all off today with a greater understanding of your core needs. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.